Super K, gather round, we'll get your video friends together. Yes, Saturday, Super K, it's time for fun. No one else can do it better. And it feels so right, because it's Super K time. Let's have some Super K fun.
What do you get when you have a new and burgeoning media with a demographic that skews towards children, and cross that with a television landscape that has recently been deregulated to allow advertisers to directly market to said children? Saturday Supercade! Yeah, like most Saturday morning cartoons of the Reagan era, Saturday Supercade was little more than an advertisement for all the hot new games that were just begging for quarters. Produced by Ruby Spears, probably best known for the hit cartoon Rubik the Amazing Cube, the series lasted from September of 1983 until December of the following year for a total of 26 episodes. Rather than using any specific popular game, Supercade was a grab bag from multiple different publishers, everything from Pitfall, the only home console game featured, to Qbert. As such, the rights behind it are a little fuzzy. So there's never been an official release of the show in its entirety, and it hasn't even been rebroadcast. Ruby Spears' assets, through the process of monopolization, would end up being owned by one of the only 3 companies left, Warner Bros. Discovery. Whoever was in charge of the Warner Archive Collection Facebook page in 2010 said that we could expect a re-release the following year, with most of the segments returning, stating that some of the series had reverted to the owners of the specific game character. Given that we are nearly 15 years out from this post and there's still not a legitimate way to watch any part of this show, it's possible that whoever created that post was mistaken and they lost the rights to more than just a few. But let's look at who all was in the show and figure out who might own these segments. First, we have Frogger, created and owned by Konami, but at the time was distributed in North America by Sega Gremlin. Depending on how the contracts were written, I could definitely see a case for Sega retaining the North American merchandising rights, but it's most likely going to Konami. Qbert was developed by Gottlieb, who at the time was owned by Columbia Pictures, which itself had just been bought by Coca-Cola, which, fun fact, is why there's a special Mellow Yellow edition of Qbert. Anyway, Columbia and Qbert along with it are now owned by Sony. Next, we have Pitfall, created by Activision, which is now owned by Microsoft, Kangaroo, owned by Sunsoft, Don Bluth's Space Ace, which is now owned by Digital Leisure, although this is probably the only one we can confirm is still owned by Warner Bros., as these segments have aired on their Classics channel Boomerang. Finally, the one I'm actually here to talk about today, Donkey Kong. Now, obviously DK is owned by Nintendo, but this was released during the time of the famous Universal lawsuit claiming Donkey Kong was a blatant ripoff of King Kong. When negotiations were ongoing to develop the cartoon, Nintendo informed Ruby Spears of Universal's litigation, to which they said that there's no way that this is happening without some sort of agreement with Universal. They said this even though they themselves did not believe Universal had any rights to the property. Universal was just that powerful in the media landscape. So Ruby Spears made an agreement and Universal declared international television distribution rights. Given the result of Universal's own lawsuit, I'm doubtful that their contract with Ruby Spears would stick, but I have seen some theorize that the Donkey Kong segments from this show would revert back to Universal and would still be owned by them. Searching on the Copyright Public Record System, however, seems to indicate the DK segments are currently owned by Nintendo of America. While the only others I can find are listed in a document from '94 listing a number of cartoons produced by Hanna-Barbera, indicating to me that Warner, at least as recently as 30 years ago, owned everything but Donkey Kong. Anyway, the point of this video was originally to determine if the DK segments of the show could possibly be canon to the rest of the Mario series. So let's actually watch this thing. The plot is a little different from the games. Donkey Kong has escaped a circus, possibly one owned by Mario, where Pauline worked as Donkey Kong's animal trainer. Most of the episodes involve the two of them chasing DK across the US, where Donkey Kong inadvertently gets involved in some sort of crime. Usually there's some contrivance to allow DK to throw a barrel or barrel-adjacent item at Mario until they're forced to team up and stop that episode's bad guys, and then DK runs off, beginning the chase anew. Alongside the Donkey Kong segments was a DK Jr. show as well. Apparently DK Jr. has traveled from a jungle to visit his dad at the circus when he finds out he's too late. Seeing him mourn for his father, the young bystander Bones offers to dedicate his life to track down the enigmatic DK. So Junior and Bones follow the trail at an attempt at reunion. These follow a similar structure. Usually they meet a child that has some sort of run-in with criminals, then use monkey muscle to solve whatever problem they run into. Alright, so let's get to it. Can this possibly be canonical? Well, both series have the crew traveling across the United States, referencing multiple real-life locations, like the first episode, called Mississippi Madness. That one takes place in Louisiana. What is interesting is that the writers did seem to take some care in connecting both DK and Junior segments by having them set in around the same location. So after the DK episode set in New Orleans, DK Jr. is crossing the Texas border. When Donkey Kong was in Hollywood, that week's Junior segment was in San Francisco. I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but I do appreciate it. So we know the real world does exist in the Mario series, for reasons that I'll expand upon in the next canon welding episode. Subscribe and stay tuned, whatever. So that checks out. But Odyssey makes it pretty clear that the original DK game took place in the Mario world and not what was commonly understood at the time to be New York. Although interestingly, the show, at least in the episodes that are still available and not lost to time, never actually goes to New York and pretty consistently stays in the southwest of the United States. Here, I made a map showing all the locations directly mentioned. Don't ask me why, I don't even know myself. Anyway, we've got multiple spots in Texas, California, and a few times they go to Mexico. And in one, they row all the way to Africa. They row all the way to Africa in one episode. New York, I don't think is ever even mentioned, much less New Donk, because why would a cartoon from '83 know about a video game location from 2017? The major thing keeping this from being canonical, in my opinion, though, is the fact that DK, Pauline, and Mario's relationship has changed. Mario and Pauline never show each other any kind of romantic attention, despite being confirmed as a couple. Pauline is Donkey Kong's animal trainer in a circus that both she and Mario work for, as compared to just being Mario's girlfriend and Donkey Kong Mario's pet. I've read a few things listing Mario as the owner of the circus, but I never saw any evidence of this in my watch. Although, if I'm being honest, this wasn't the most entertaining cartoon I've ever watched, and I may have dozed off at one point. This backstory does at least tie it to the Game & Watch Donkey Kong Circus game, but it is different from the established story in the Donkey Kong arcade. Alright, so while I mull over if this is a canonical entry in the Mario series, here's a list of odd and interesting notes I made while watching. Mario is voiced by Peter Cullen, best known as Optimus Prime. Bone states that Texas is the largest state in the Union, not the contiguous US, implying that in this universe that either the Alaska Statehood Act was never passed, or Bones is just an idiot. It's one of those two. Donkey Kong Jr. straight up kills some dudes by crushing a house using his trademark monkey muscle. This episode has Mario dressed in a painter's outfit that looks very similar to the Mario Artist series on the 64DD. In one episode, DK Jr. and Bones cross paths with a kid superhero named Kid Dynamo, which, fine, it's a Saturday morning cartoon in the 80s, it'd be dumb not to throw some cape shit in, but both the kid and his dog received powers from the same blue meteor. The kid gets flight and strength, the dog gets to talk. What bothers me most about this is that all the characters find a talking dog surprising, even Bones, despite the fact that DK Jr. is a talking gorilla. Hell, later on there's a Donkey Kong segment featuring a gorilla auction, where a costume Mario has unwittingly ended up in. When the crowd finds out he can talk, everyone is surprised, even though this episode earlier on introduced another talking gorilla. And throughout both series, no one is ever surprised by DK or Jr. speaking. In the Christmas special, Junior says that he's going through another holiday without his father, implying that he hasn't seen him in over a year. Also, Santa exists. Junior reveals he has an Uncle Julius that lives in a zoo. It's never revealed which side of the family he comes from. Stanley the Bugman from Greenhouse and Donkey Kong 3 actually shows up in an episode, presumably to advertise said Donkey Kong 3. And finally, in the transition between segments, the characters of the respective spots would have a changeover and interact with one another. From Frogger getting flattened and DK helping him out, to Q*bert and Space Ace having a mid-air collision. So if this show is canon to Mario, are all these other characters too? Thankfully, I don't think we have to worry about that, as I'm almost positive this is not canon. For one, it was simply licensed by Ruby Spears without Nintendo's direct involvement. I could possibly see an argument for it. Maybe after the game, DK, Mario, and Pauline all came to Earth and had some adventures before heading back to the Mushroom Kingdom. But I do think that's a bit of a stretch. So yeah, it's not canon, but I do think it's worth preserving. A big problem I had with this episode is that a decent quantity of the segments have been lost, potentially forever. Certain segments have been re-released in some form. Q*bert had a DVD release, and Space Ace had reruns on Boomerang, but others like Frogger, Kangaroo, they're gone. I just think it'd be a shame if Warner or whoever owns the rights to these cartoons just sat on them indefinitely. They are still art, people did work hard on them, and they were a part of somebody's childhood. And really, I just want the Annie remake where Annie's replaced by an 800-pound gorilla cartoon that this title promised.